Hello, my name is Isaac Maim. My EDX ID is Isaac 9000 and I live in Switzerland. I finished recording this presentation on December 5th. For my final project, I would like to present the Change Healthcare attack that took place on February 2024. Here is how I will present this project. First, I will explain why I picked this case. Then we will see what happened, who the victim and the adversary were, how the attack happened, the timeline of the attack, the vulnerabilities that allowed the attack to happen, the impact, and finally the learnings. This case illustrates that even the largest corporations may fail on basic cybersecurity hygiene with a significant impact. In this case, there were huge financial and some reputational consequences, significant business distractions, and the disclosure of confidential data of millions of people, data which was in Change Healthcare's possession and they were supposed to keep safe. So what happened? Change Healthcare was attacked by AV Black Cat on February 2024. Data of around 190 million individuals was exposed and ransomware was deployed. Change Healthcare paid a ransom of $22 million. The damage was not limited to these 22 millions. The total cost was estimated to be north of $3 billion. A few words about Change Healthcare, the victim. This is one of the largest US healthcare payment processors owned by the United Health Group. Its services include, for example, medical claims, pharmacy transactions, billings, and insurance eligibility. They handle around 15 billion transactions per year. The adversary, AV Black Cat, is one of the world's most advanced ransomware groups. It operates as a ransom-as-a-service platform, providing ransomware tools to affiliates who perform the attacks. They target large corporations. Their tools can run on multiple platforms and are suitable for large enterprises. Once in, their tools allow navigating within the victim's network for identifying high-value assets while avoiding detection. They perform multi-layer extortions, not only deploying ransomware, but also stealing sensitive data and threatening individuals and organizations. The attack had 4 stages. First, the adversary managed to obtain access credentials to a Citrix remote access gateway of Change Healthcare. It then used these credentials to gain access to the Change Healthcare's computer systems. Once in, it roamed through lateral moves to detect valuable data. Finally, it exfiltrated the data and deployed the ransomware. The adversary gained access to the systems on February 21st. We don't know how much time they needed to hack the credentials nor how they did it. Immediately after gaining access and before the intrusion was detected and systems taken offline, the adversary roamed the victim's network through lateral moves, exfiltrating data and installing ransomware components. The same day, the intrusion was detected by Change Healthcare. Immediately, the Change Healthcare data centers were disconnected from the United Healthcare Group. Systems were taken offline and transaction services were shut down. This had a huge business impact on Change Healthcare's business partners, as no transactions within their scope could be processed anymore. The $22 million ransom was paid in March. However, the full restoration of the systems took several months. In addition to decrypting data encrypted through the ransomware, forensic investigations had to be conducted, data integrity verified, rehardening and rebuilding undertaken, and external business partners reconnected and reassured. The stolen data started to circulate on July and is still circulating. So, what were the vulnerabilities that led to this situation? We can classify them with regards to the stages of the attack. Considering the credential theft, the fact that the access credentials could be hacked hints that good password practices were likely not implemented. Somebody had been able to hack the password through known methods such as brute force attacks, credential stuffing, or even social engineering. Those could have been detected and prevented if logging attempts had been monitored for detecting unusual activities and stopped, if proper password formats had been enforced and the entire user populations, employees and contractors, had been properly trained. The Citrix gateway configuration had a major vulnerability highlighted in the post-mortem. It had not been configured to require multi-factor authentication. This made that once credentials had been compromised, there were no other defenses against intrusions. From that point on, it was a free ride. For the subsequent stages, the fact that the adversary could make extensive lateral moves with hacked credentials hints that the computer assets had not been protected with sufficient access restrictions, such as network segmentation and minimum access rights. How about the impact of this attack? Let's first take a look at the impact on individuals. Personal data that could be misused for identity theft, medical fraud, targeted phishing, and harassment had been compromised and is currently still circulating. This data includes personally identifiable information such as names, date of birth, social security numbers, national ID numbers. Demographic and identity-related data such as addresses, phone numbers, email addresses. Medical and health data such as diagnoses, treatments, prescription data. Insurance policy numbers, claim history, payment history, bank and payment-related information. The business partners of Change Healthcare were also severely impacted during weeks. As a result of the system's shutdowns and disconnections, all services provided by Change Healthcare were stopped and the US healthcare payment infrastructure was severely disrupted. For example, pharmacies could not process insurance claims, clinics could not submit bills, hospitals went back to manual workflows. All these provoked delays in medication access and cash flow crisis for several business partners. Finally, let's take a look at the impact on Change Healthcare and the United Health Group. As mentioned earlier, the total cost was estimated to have exceeded $3 billion. This includes incident response, systems restoration, and the ransom, although the ransom seems small compared to the total cost, legal costs and regulatory fines, costs related to business disruptions and discontinuity, reputational costs. I'm guessing this is mostly among the business partners of Change Healthcare and not the public, since the United Health Group's stock was resilient. Advances to business partners, some of it recovered back after the systems were restored. The attack must have provoked a serious distraction from business growth, as the company had to dedicate significant focus, money, and manpower on recovery, rebuilding, rehardening, and damage control. Finally, the costs were incurred by the parent company, the United Health Group, rather than the hacked company, Change Healthcare. To finish, let's take a look at the learnings. Some learnings are consequences of the vulnerabilities. Similar to the vulnerabilities, these learnings can be classified with regards to the stages of the attack. We have seen that to prevent credential theft requires implementing and enforcing good credential practices, training, as well as login monitoring. For the entry points from the internet, it is key to always require multi-factor authentication and keeping relentless patching to these points to have up-to-date protection against malware. Also, compartmenting the system's environments by segmenting networks and granting minimum privileges is necessary to limit damage once an adversary gets in, despite all the measures taken. And finally, it is key to constantly improve the incident response plans in order to shorten the recovery times as much as possible. Thank you very much for your attention.